This morning, I am speaking to those of you who have either read the book or you've listened to the sermon series, and so I'm trying to go very, very practical here, And it's amazing to me that when we started Epic Church, there were 5 kids who spent a whole lot of time together. We had play dates. They were at each other's houses so we could do date nights because we didn't know anyone else in the city. They were helping out at church with whatever their little hands could pick up and move around as we were setting up and tearing down. And then they were serving the community. So where we've got Serve the City next weekend, and there will be hundreds of us serving. Back in that day, Serve the City looked like 20 of us showing up. And so we were definitely doing things that they could participate in. And to think now, those 5 kids, 4 of them are in student ministry here at Epic, and 1 will be there this summer. But to also think where God has grown this family ministry is pretty remarkable. But yet, what our 5 kids started off doing and how we were doing family back then is still very much the DNA of Epic Church. We're swapping kids for date nights, and they have play dates together. And since the beginning, kids have definitely had a voice and a place to serve here at church and in the community. And I just love that is who we are. Aniki referenced the text in Jeremiah. And I love that, and that God does want to use the family. He did not say, I'm making noises. He did not say, okay, this is for the adults in the family, but it's for all of us. And as I pull ideas from this book, again, it is going to be very practical. I'm really going to unpack 2 sections of this book. The first session, we're going to unpack who we are. And then the second session, we're going to unpack where we get to live this out. But here is the big umbrella that we're operating under, because I'm not going to dive into this part, but here's the big umbrella we're operating under. And that is God's Word, God's way. God's Word, God's way. It is our foundation. There is no shortcut. There is no diet plan. There is no way around it. We go through it. It is what we build upon. So anything said today is built upon that foundation. Make sense? It's built upon this foundation. Anything said today comes after or because of the reading, hearing, and doing of the Word of God. The way we engage in our culture, the ideas and things that we use at home should all be built upon that foundation. This is what I believe. If you can show me a family on mission, I'll show you world changers. This will be on the screen. Show me a family on mission, and I'll show you world changers. Okay, world changers is used a lot, and to me, it's kind of like winning the lottery, right? A lot of people play, and a few people win. So when I think of world changers, I think, well, many of us are going to try this, but really, only few people get their name in the spotlight for having made this remarkable difference in the world. Now, think of it a little differently and think that hone in on what our world is, where you do life, and what your world consists of, and then you really can start to say, wow, if we can be a family on mission, we really can change the world. Here's also what I mean by world changers. For our family, we've had 9 years at one elementary school. We're about to wrap that thing up. 9 years at one elementary school. And it's been there that we've met another family who come here to Epic that are believers at our school. We have our kindergarten teacher who sponsors a child through Compassion International because of simply a poster, All About Me poster is where that started. So 9 years in one school, and none of them are going to cry when we leave. But what I want to happen when we leave is say, you know what? We're so glad the Pilgrims passed through this school. Our street. It is just one little street in the cosmos of this world. But on this one little street, we have really gotten to know and knock on the doors and step into many of the homes that are right around our house. But we live on a very busy intersection. And so to get to know the people beyond those 8 homes, we handed out pizza last year, and we're already getting the date down on the calendar for the spring once the rain stops. But it's creating moments so that neighbors know that we're the people that they can count on. This is what I mean by world changers. Because what happens, and the whole talk of this is we're doing life together as a family, where they're beside us, watching a lot of the stuff with us. In such a way that our kids are going to see, I can do that. I can walk up to somebody and have a conversation. Or, you know what? I saw this thing that we tried doing as a family, and it failed, but we tried something different. So we're doing this together as a family, and I really do believe that the way we just live life with our kids, they're really going to believe that they can take on so much more. Here's another quote I want to share with you. Jamie Ivey is a pastor's wife in Austin, Texas. They've adopted several kids, and she has a podcast and an author. But I love this quote from her. We cannot teach our kids to give their lives away for the gospel when all they see is us giving away our lives for them. We cannot teach our kids to give their lives away for the gospel when all they see is us giving away our lives for them. Now, I do think, right, the pendulum swings. I do think that we as a family unit, I do believe we're doing a better job of this than maybe how we were raised. I don't know about your parents, but my parents did what all the other parents did. And that was my dad went to work, and I had no clue what he did during the day. I didn't know who he spent his time with. But when he came home, he was engaged at home, but he was very much involved in helping us get our homework done and getting us to the next activities. And so all I saw of my dad, by and large, is he had his life out there, but all I knew is that he was very absorbed with our lives when we came home, because I did not know what he did and the struggles he had and who he talked to and how he was investing in other people. I didn't see what all he was involved in. And as I look back now, I'm like, wow, I really wish I had heard those stories. Or, nowadays you got bring your kid to work day, right? I don't know if you ever went with your parents to work back then. I do think we're doing a lot better job at this. But I do think growing up, we lived very segregated lives in our family. And I do see that changing some. And what I mean by that is just integrating who you are, who you're becoming, telling your kids the story of the people that you got to meet, or the hardships sometimes that you're facing, or how you're continuing to learn and grow. This is really obvious to me here as far as living out, giving our lives away for the gospel as opposed to giving our lives away for our kids. You see it if you're not already engulfed in it. And that is, here we feel like we've got to learn more, we've got to get into this school, we've got interviews and resumes for preschool. You've got to prove yourself, you've got to play on this team so that you can get on that team eventually. We have some friends who we did elementary and middle school with, and it was in middle school, going into the summer where Elijah was going to go on the Uganda trip with Epic as a 12-year-old. And I was telling her what we were doing that summer after she told me that her kids were going to be going to France and Japan, going to school, and that on Saturdays they spend their weekends here in the city learning another language. Really impressed with their family, but the one thing that she was impressed with ours is that they don't do any community projects. All of it is on what they can take in, not what they can give out. And I do think that there can be a balance of this, but I do think in the city, we get caught up in this stream of our kids have to be involved as much as they can be in order to succeed. And I do think that we're missing the mark if that's what we're going after. So, how we're going to unpack this today is starting right where you are. And we all are at different places. We all didn't show up this morning all at this same place and we're moving on. So this is not like orientation, and we all have spent one night in the city, and we all have the same number of boxes still to unpack, right? We all are from all different places. So I say this to you, you're gonna start with where you are. I'm gonna tell you stories of 9 years in, and maybe you're starting where I am 9 years in, but maybe you're starting at, I haven't even moved to the city yet. And we're going to start there. So start with where you are. Because our starting point in 2010 here in San Francisco, I'm able to share what we've seen God do and what we've been a part of. But here's what I want you to know about me. you might already know this. I'm an introvert. When I get home this afternoon, I won't have any other conversations with people. And we'll be perfectly fine with that. My glass is always half empty. I'm married to a glass half full guy, but my glass is always half empty. So when I see blankets left on the road, before I see the blankets left on the road, before I see the person who had to leave the blanket because he didn't have a bed to put it on. That's how I tend to see life. I'm a homebody, so there's got to be a good reason to leave the house for me. I also crave sunshine, so I'm in a deficit right now. Crave sunshine, but that's where I start from, and that's still who I am today. And I'm working. I'm not saying those things are necessarily bad, but that's how I process life. God has moved me. And he's worked in me, and the kids have seen this transformation because we're doing life with them. So the kids could tell you, yes, that's my mom. Because in our parenting years, we try to do as much in front of them as we can. Our kids were 2, 4, and 6 at the time when we moved here. And I remember, as far as starting where we were, that summer, we had a nursing home right across the street from us. And we just began to make cards for them one summer afternoon to take to the elderly across the street. Now, since that elderly home, I think we went to another elderly home one time as a field trip with our school. But just doing life with people, and you know, this city is so young. You almost have to look for the elderly in the city. And I think the longer you're here, the more you see them. But now our kids are just very comfortable walking over to our neighbor's house and knocking on our elderly neighbor's door. So it's doing life with them. As much as you can invite them into life with you, do that. And if your kids are already teenagers, it's not too late to start. And if they're still strapped to you and you wonder if they're paying attention, eventually they will. They're going to start noticing. So as we talk today about who we are and where we live this out, think of how this applies to you and your family. I say this not because any of you are thinking this, but maybe the one in the room who's thinking, well, that's the Pilgrims. And we don't need any more Pilgrims, but we do need 4 more one day. And we pray for those 4 spouses. That's all the Pilgrims we need. So we need you to be who God is creating you to be, and your giftedness and your wiring, and we need to be who we are. I love the family that's at our school now. They are really big into the arts program. We're not wired that way, but I love when I see her showing up at the school and all the art stuff that she's carrying around, and just I look and I'm amazed. So we all need to be doing our part. Okay, I'm going to unpack 5 things right now. And as I unpack these, it's kind of like the 5 love languages. You guys familiar with the 5 love languages? Kavita and I are going through the 5 love languages for teenagers right now. So think about the 5 love languages. There's a love you tend to give away, and then there's one that's the strong one on how you like to receive. So we're going to talk about 5 who we are, 5 ways of who we are. And I think some of these you're just like, I love that one, nailed it. And then there's some of these you're just like, okay, I got to work on that a little bit. So these are from the Dweller of Purpose section in the book, but it's connector, grace giver, intercessor, connector, storyteller. I said one too many. Caretaker. Okay, we'll unpack them as we go. Okay, for the first one, connector. And these are who we are. These are who we are as believers, as Christ followers in the city. Okay, we're connectors. Some of you are amazing at this, and some of you are you're working on it. All right, connecting. You start small, but you start looking. You're looking for a way to connect people. This city is massive, and there's some days, and maybe you feel it today. I think having to catch a lift today, the city just felt so much bigger because I wasn't in control of the steering wheel. The city is really big. So connector, we're just daily looking for ways to connect people and connect with people. I do believe this is an art, and the more practice we have at it, the better we get. But most of us already have enough people in our lives, okay? Some of you, you just moved here, you need friends, you're looking for friends. And we want to be that friend to you. But some of you, you're just like, my plate is full, I have got so many people already in my life. So you just start with the people that are already there. and you just start connecting with the people that you see. So maybe it's the repairman at your house, or you've got a dental appointment this week that you're not looking forward to. You just begin to connect with the people that you see. Dentist, teacher, coach, repairman, babysitter. Babysitter, that's an easy one, right? You come home after your date or before you go on your date, and you just get to know that babysitter. And then how do you connect? Well, if you're not greedy, you'll share her or his name with your friends who can also share. But I understand there's some you don't want to share their names because you love them too much. But that's another way we can even just be connecting with the people in our lives. Okay, game changer is that connecting always keeps us present. Okay? We can connect really well on this phone, but we can do a lot more connecting when it's out of our hands and we're noticing the people that we see. Okay? Connecting does keep us present. It keeps us attentive. So, it's very easy to walk down the street with that phone in our hand, but it's also, when we set it down, we can be really present in the moment. Connecting keeps us present. Okay, another thing with connector. Pay attention to what other people are paying attention to in you. Pay attention to what other people are paying attention to in you. If someone keeps showing up at your kids' games or at my gym, little gym, and they seem to always keep coming in conversation with you, pay attention. There's something there. If a young person seems interested in your role at work, there's something there. If someone is complimenting your cooking or the way you are with your kids or the way you speak good of others, pay attention to what others are paying attention to in you. There's something there. And guys, that's the best ground to start at, right? Because they're already showing interest. Now, I want to point out, and this really applies to this whole lifestyle of living sent, that not all connections, not all conversations are going to mention Jesus. But they all should reflect him. They all should reflect him. I'm going to point on Candace. She's probably already telling Sharon back there what we were talking about here. But yesterday, Candace and I are having coffee. And there was a guy sitting beside us, and he needed another seat. So I ended up moving a chair around so I could move, and his friend, we found out it was his brother visiting from Boston, could come and sit beside him. And so we just got to, this was maybe a 60-second conversation of, we also moved away from family, and the guy thought Candace was my mom. Clearly, we're too close in age for that to be. But, so we just struck up a conversation. We said, no, we're learning to find family here. Now, we did not mention Jesus at all. But I'm hoping that in us giving up a seat, us making room for his brother, us pointing out we too have moved away from family, but we've learned to find family here, that it was a connection point. And that God would use that. And maybe he's going to figure out, hey, I got to figure out where I'm going to find my family here in this city. You'll get a kick out of this. So I have, again, and I'll talk about quadrants next, about where we get to live this out. But my main grocery store is Safeway Diamond Heights. And I love, if Maria is a clerk that day, I always go in Maria's line. And what is incredible is last week we were out of town, and my mom sends me a text message. And she said, Maria keeps asking that I come to her lane because she wants to talk. Now, my mom has a really, really thick Southern accent, so I know that was probably the reason why she wanted my mom to come and talk to her. But I love that Maria knows me, and now Maria knows my mom. Okay, Maria doesn't know that I'm a Christ follower. She doesn't know where I go to church, but she knows how many kids I have. She knows what school we go to. And those 60-second conversations every week, it's forming something. It's forming something. But even if all of our conversations and connections do not mention Jesus, there are times when they can. There are times when they can't. I share the story in the book about Rekha the Nurse. If you remember Rekha the Nurse, just in talking to her about moving far away from family and telling her that we have found family here, she wanted to know where we found family. And I got to tell her about Epic. And she showed up 2 days later, and she got to see Asher being baptized. So sometimes those conversations, they do lead to you getting to talk about your church or your faith or Jesus. I want to point out that in Saul's story before he became Paul, but he was on the road to Damascus, and I share this story in the book where God was working in Saul to send him to Ananias, and then God was speaking to Ananias to say, hey, this guy, you've probably heard of him, but I need you to meet him because this is where things are going to come together, and he's going to stop persecuting Christians, he's going to follow me, and then he's going to be this amazing world changer, right? That's connection. That's God doing his thing in someone else's life, God doing his thing in your life, and you can't even see what God's doing over here in this person's life, but God is working constantly at making these connections. And when you get to see it, you just want more. You just want more. So you have to be attentive to these. Don't have the pressure that all of these conversations and connections have to mention the name of Jesus, but know in time it's coming. It's really exciting. Okay, connector. The next one is grace giver. Grace giver. When we are at home with ourselves, when we're comfortable with ourselves and with the God who has called us here, then we're not having to put up a fight for space in this city. We're not having to put up a fight for our right to be heard and for those people just to move on and be quiet. This has everything to do with this perspective of God has given me so much grace and it doesn't run out and I get to give it away. But we do have to be at home with who we are and with what God has called us here to do, to not let all those little things drive us crazy. But it's the person honking the horn, and we live on an intersection, so we hear the horn honking all the time. And the windows are shut, I can't even see what's going on, but I'm just talking to the person honking the horn and saying, chill out, right? But they left mad at their spouse that morning, or they're running late, and so that's why they're honking the horn. But it's just like these are these moments where we have the capacity to give grace. Now, certainly there are places, and they tend to be vacation spots, but certainly there are places where we can live and certain people we can live nearby who seem just to make giving grace easier, right? I don't feel like I have to give a ton of grace out on Sunday mornings when I'm here. But the minute we get home, or the minute I get to that Safeway grocery store, right, it kicks into full gear. But people who aren't like us and don't think like us, or even on our worst days, that we can't find anything good or in common with them, that's when they and us both need grace. And that's just a beautiful thing about walking with Jesus. It's not like, well, grace is on reserve, and when we need it, we'll pull it out and have to use it, right? No, this is just a continual fountain that should just be flowing through us because we have received it, and of course we're going to give it away. Of course you can have that parking spot that I've been sitting here for 5 minutes waiting on. Of course, I was here first, but go right ahead, right? It's just this continual grace flowing through us. Grace is not a one-time thing, and it's not like to giving away and that there's none left. God bestows grace upon us. No other religion, and I love this about Jesus Christ, no other religion exists where the Creator stands with his created to draw others to himself. He calls us to give grace right alongside him. Love others out of this truth, for when we forget this profound identity, we cease to live sent with purpose. I do think it's kind of like that clogged drain, right? When the city is just about to explode on you because you can think of all the things that you're mad at. It tends that there's that clogged drain, and what unclogs it is grace. Grace doesn't come with names, but is labeled for all the one another's that we encounter. And so to think about who are these one another's where you just feel like there is that tension there, there's that clogged drain regarding this circumstance or this person, and oftentimes grace is what will unclog it. Our kids will give the grace away that they receive at home. Our kids were going to give the grace away that they receive at home. They learn this from us. And I think we get excellent opportunities in the city to model this for them, right? All right, this leads me to my next point. We're connectors, we're grace givers, we're intercessors. I really do believe that as we start to give grace away, we start to intercede. Because when you're giving grace away, you realize that person is I can pray for. Intercessors are people who pray for others. And I think as you're teaching prayer to your young kids, there's lots of different ways that you can teach prayer. But I do believe in a very self-absorbed culture that we're raising our kids in, intercession is that certain way of having them focus outward. I'm going to give you a few stories of this and a few different ways that you can even pray with your kids and, of course, for yourself. Use your senses to pray. Use your senses to pray. I'm going to give you a few examples. Usually about 5:50 in the morning, I hear a thump outside. Any guess what that thump is? Newspaper. The newspaper arrives. And these days when that newspaper is arriving, I'm just thinking, how many more papers is he having to deliver in this pouring down rain? So God, would you keep the newspaper person safe as he drives? I told you we live on a busy intersection. That's crazy. I've already said that 3 times. But to hear the cars zoom by and the water splash up, and to think, God, would you keep them safe? And this is usually about midnight, 1 a.m., and then I roll back over. But God, would you keep them safe as they drive? The smell of people as we walk our sidewalks, that smell like they have not felt water or soap in several days. And the prayer is there, God, would you open up housing and job opportunities in this city? God, would you use the organizations that are already here to have the funding to meet needs? I've yet to try these, but it's on my bucket list. I think it's higher on our son Elijah's bucket list. But the street vendors that are cooking the hot dogs wrapped in bacon beside all the grilled vegetables, have you had those? I heard him, that was a yeah, no, okay. But those things smell so amazing. But to think about the person that's standing there cooking that, who's away from their kids right now so that they can feed us out on the street, and just saying, God, would you multiply what they're making right now so that they can take care of their family? Use your senses. Use your senses. Have your kids use their senses as you're going out. What do you see that we can pray about? What do you smell that we can pray about? What are you hearing that we can pray about? Use your senses. This has been with us from the get-go, but anytime we hear sirens, that was probably one of the earliest ways we learned or taught our kids how to pray for others. Anytime you hear a siren, you stop what you're doing and pray. Okay, you don't stop what you're doing because you're usually in the car driving, but you just say, hey, God, would you have the doctors ready and willing and able to be there to greet that ambulance when it shows up at that hospital? But ambulance is where I feel like we first taught our kids to pray for others. And again, this is just praying as you go, right? None of these prayers I just mentioned are happening right around your kitchen table or at bedtime. Learn to pray as you go. There was, let's see, how am I doing on time? What time are we stopping? In a bit. Okay. I'm going to tell you 2 quick stories on Intercessor. And I told my kids I was using their name. They will not let Ben use their names on Sunday, but I told them the camera was not going to be on. This past Sunday, Asher's standing right beside me. And there's been someone here at Epic that we've been praying for. And particularly Asher's been praying for this person. And Asher looked over at me and goes, did you see so-and-so here at church? He said, I love it when we get to see her here that we've been praying for her all week. Right? It's just something he's been praying for, but he gets excited when he sees this person at church. Another story is Sam has invested in this one kid at our school, and they've become really good friends. And one day he could tell his friend was just having a really bad day. And they were throwing the ball in the gym. And he just said, hey, is everything okay? And his friend started crying, which you know is totally not cool in middle school. And so they sat down, and the friend just began to tell Sam what's going on. And it was some really weighty stuff. And at this point in the afternoon, Sam comes into the house, and he's like, Mom, we got to talk. So we go into the bedroom, close the door, and he tells me this. And I was like, Sam, what did you do? And he's looking around like, is there another? What? Mama prayed with him. He's like, right there? He said, yeah, I even held his hand. And I'm like, you held hands with your friend in the gym with a bunch of other 7th graders. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. I was like, that just went above where my teaching level has been, right? I'm like, that's awesome. That's awesome. But that's just what you teach them. God's going to take them farther than you can ever take them. Okay, so intercessor. And let me point this out really quick. I just heard on a video this past week on praying. I thought this is great. Keep it simple, keep it honest, keep it ongoing. All the credit of that goes to the Alpha course. Keep it simple, keep it honest, and keep it ongoing. Okay, the last two, caretaker. Caretaker is all about how do you help your family rest? How do you help your family rest? We all rest differently. In your household, you all rest differently. Okay? I already told you we're homebodies. I've made my kids this way. Ben rests when he walks. I rest inside the house with candles and a book. Elijah rests with a ball in his hand at all times. Sam rests when he tinkers. Asher rests when he's close to somebody. And Kavita rests with music. We all rest in very different ways. Very different ways. So I think you need to figure out, how do you rest as a family, individuals? This is where one-on-one dates have spurred out for our family, because we don't all like going to the beach, or we don't all like going to the park, or we don't all like doing this. So again, divide and conquer and help your kids learn how to rest. Also, know where you like to go and rest in your city. Know where you like to go and rest in your city. Rest and care are not complete escapes, but rest and care are about letting the Spirit of the living God restore and replenish you. And this requires calendaring. This requires scheduling. You do have to make time for this. And then the last one, storyteller. Storyteller. Now, I want to make a distinction between being a connector and being a storyteller. Connecting the dots and realizing you've got something in common, or that they know someone you know, that's connecting. Okay? Helping people meet up with each other, that's connecting. But it also can be connecting to their story in a way that leads you to share more and to share your story. So connecting can lead to storytelling. But storytelling is unpacking a moment. Storytelling is because they're interested in knowing more. Okay, makes sense, the difference between the two? A few different ways this works. You listen for a conversation as you're trying to connect, and then you think of a story. Or if you can't think of a story, you ask them for one of their stories. I think here in the city, one thing that helps us is telling city stories. Telling stories of, hey, have you guys discovered this? Or did you know that there's free day here? Or one story I felt like we tell so much is getting into the public school system here in this city. But I also want to give you this little bit of homework. Psalm 78. The caption of Psalm 78 is "Tell the coming generation." And in Psalm 78, it really is a legacy of what they've seen God do. And we're working on this at home, where we're writing down, what have we seen God do? What have we been a part of? Especially some of you where your kids are just really little and there's things you would love to tell them right now that just aren't going to make sense. Start writing those things out. So I would encourage you, read Psalm 78 and then start writing out your own personal story. We're even getting our parents to do this for our kids, where you're writing out the legacy. What have you seen God do? Because oftentimes this is not always coming up at home, or your kids are too young to hear this now. But can you imagine reading that to them one day? We tell of God's wonders so that our kids will set their hopes on God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commands, right? We have to wake up every day and receive that grace and come before God. Why do we think that our kids aren't going to need the very same thing, right? We always need those reminders. So again, intercessor, grace giver, connector, storyteller, caretaker. We live this lifestyle not because, this is important, we live this lifestyle not because there are people in our city who don't know Jesus, and it's our job to save them. We live this lifestyle because Jesus is the best part of us, and we love people because he loves us. So much of this lifestyle in this book is about engaging even with other believers and doing life together so that we can be an encouragement and a blessing and can make lifelong friends, go on trips together, date nights, small groups, everything. So this book is not like, who are all the non-believers in my life? This book is, hey, I want to live like God has me here for a purpose. And there might be a conversation I have with a non-Christian, but there might be a whole lot of conversations that I'm having with believers here. Okay, so it's not one or, it's both and. So when I make an introduction to someone and I'm telling them my name, I'm keeping it on the surface, right? I'm not pouring my whole life out to them, to Maria in particular. But over time, as a relationship forms, we can tell more. But one thing I do want you to do is we need just to be able to drop this weighty pressure that we have to work Jesus into every conversation. Being kind, and this is teaching it to our kids, being kind, meeting a need, offering a smile, empathizing with someone, and then watch for God to do his thing. Then watch for God to do his thing. Okay, Atul is going to come up, and he's going to invite some other people to come and tell you their story and tell you how they're thriving.